Hi, I'm Brittany, a neurodivergent mum and speech pathologist. This is Not Just Theories, where I share what actually works in my real, messy life. Because life doesn't follow a theory. Here's what I actually do. Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today, I want to share something that really shaped the way that we do meals in our house, which is the division of responsibility in feeding. So this is a framework developed by Ellyn. She explains it absolutely beautifully in her book, Secrets to Feeding a Healthy Family. You might have heard of this before. It's often shortened to DOR or SDOR. And the idea behind the division of responsibility is actually really simple, but it is a game changer. So it goes like this. Parents are responsible for the what, when, and where of feeding, and children are responsible for the how much and whether of eating. In other words, our job is to provide and their job is to decide. So what does that actually look like around a busy family table with real kids and real food? I'm going to share some snapshots from our home. So one of our go-to dinners is chicken salad wraps. So it's an easy weeknight meal. We just grab a rotisserie chicken from the shops and chop up some salad, and we put all the ingredients out on the table. We have the flatbreads, we have the chicken, we have things like lettuce, tomato, cucumber, grated carrot, grated cheese. We have sauces like mayonnaise or hummus available. And everyone gets to build their own wrap. I love this meal because one, it's easy, but also because once I've done my job, which is to decide what's for dinner, when we're having it, and the fact that we're all sitting down together at the table, once it's on the table, my kids get to decide what goes in their wrap. I don't need to decide. So sometimes they may just want chicken and cheese. Another time they might try and pile everything in, and then we're forced trying to help them hold a very big, heavy, falling apart wrap. But we always try not to comment on who eats what, because that part is their responsibility. If all they eat is cucumber, that's fine. Sometimes the combinations they come up with are quite creative. There was one time that my daughter made a wrap with only mayonnaise and blueberries, which we just put on the table because they were left over from the afternoon tea snack. So yes, mayonnaise and blueberries on a wrap. I'm not going to lie, it looked pretty questionable, but you know what? She ate it. She ate it happily. And that is a win in my books. So she got to experiment, she trusted herself, and she had a really positive experience at the table. And that's the heart of this approach, is that we present and provide the food and they get to choose what and how much or whether they eat any of it. And it means that they get to do things like figure out that mayonnaise and blueberries, while it's not a traditional combination by any means, that's a flavor profile that they really like. And this is how we learn what goes together and what we like, is by trying things out, by experimenting. And we try really hard not to comment either way on whether they're eating or not eating. So when she made that wrap, it was really hard not to say yuck or ew, because it was not something that was at all appealing to me. But we try so hard not to use words like that in our house, because if I'd done that, she might not have actually tried it and would have been a complete waste of food. But as it was, she ate it and enjoyed it. So yes, the whole don't yuck other people's yum. But it goes both ways. So when she does eat something that maybe I am a bit excited about, we try hard not to react either. So if she's trying something new that we've presented a few times, we just keep having our normal dinner time conversations. We don't draw attention to the fact she's tried something new unless she wants us to. So taking all that pressure off. Another thing that we do, which is very much in line with Ellyn Satter's approach, is always make sure that there is a safe food on the table. So a safe food is something that your child is pretty much guaranteed to eat, and what that is might be different for different families. They might have multiple safe foods and you can choose just make sure one of them's on the table. For us, we pretty much always just make sure there's bread available on the table at dinner time. Other families, it might be something else, or they might have multiple options as long as there's bread or rice or hot chips or mashed potato. That might work for their family. Pretty much all of those other things that might be standard safe go-tos are not actually safe foods for my child. Basically, her two safe foods are bread or cucumbers. As long as one of them's on the table, she'll eat something. So a real life example of how this safe food might play out. One night when we had bolognese, pasta sauce, and pasta, which are usually one of her favourite meals, I'd almost call it a safe food, she ate nothing but the garlic bread. And then the next night she did the same thing again. We'd had beef stew, which is again one of the three go-tos. So chicken salad wraps, beef stew, bolognese are sort of the three things other than bread that I would almost call safe foods. But she just ignored them. She only ate the garlic bread. And to be honest, I started to worry by giving her full rein on the bread, even when I'm presenting something that I know she really enjoys. Is this just leaning into giving her too much power? Is she going to just ignore everything and only ever eat bread? Because there's so much pressure as parents that you feel like the variety of food your children are eating is a reflection of you. But actually, division of responsibility, it's not our job to make our child eat different foods. Our job is to present them, to make them available, to model eating them as much as we can ourselves. And it is our child's responsibility to choose whether or not they're going to eat it. We can't take responsibility for that. It's not our job. And the garlic bread example, it didn't play out that way. The bread phase felt like it was lasting forever, but she did eventually circle back to eating more variety. I mean, she's still a toddler, so her palate isn't the widest in the world. But watching that phase come and go really reminded me it does balance out over time. Another key example, which I've already touched on a little bit, is that it's important to be low pressure about this. So in our house, we don't put any pressure on our children to eat. So we don't do, just try one bite. We don't celebrate if someone eats a new food. We don't sigh if they don't. We don't use dessert as a reward. The win is simply that the food is on the table. So they're seeing it, they're smelling it, they're watching us eat it. So you might see your child ignore a food for months, and that's fine. I mean, there's research that kids need to see a food prepared the same way at least 15 times before they'll try it. And that's for a typically developing child. So, children who are neurodivergent might need heaps more than that, and they still might never try it. And that, again, it's not a moral failure. Eating a variety of food is not a moral success. But for typically developing children, it's still 15 times. And that's 15 times prepared the same way. So if you always prepare your carrots and you cut them into rounds and you steam them, and you've done that 10 times, but then you switch and all of a sudden you're roasting them and you're presenting them in cut up sticks, that's a different food to that child. And they might need their own 15 repetitions of that. And you still need to do more of the circles steamed carrots for it to be considered the 15 true exposures. And then if you just keep offering them, again, I'm talking about typically developing kids here, most of the time they will eventually try it. So that's not me putting it on their plate when they didn't want it. That's not me, forcing them to try a bite. It's just by putting it on the table over and over and over again, eventually they ask to try it. In fact, one of the best ways for trying new foods I found is to just not offer them to my child at all and just eat them myself and pretend that, they're a special thing for me. The other night we were having fish and chips and I was putting some malt vinegar on my chips. We just had it on the table as a sauce, and my daughter completely voluntarily said, I'd like to try that because she saw me using it, she saw me enjoying it, and she just wanted to give it a go. Now, I eat a lot of vinegar, so she had a lot of exposure to vinegar, and I think at no point did I ever force her to try it. She just on her own eventually asked to. Another key part of this is just thinking about when you're offering a range of foods and you're presenting it, don't just offer what's your stereotypical kid-friendly food. Both of my kids eat foods that I didn't even try until I was an adult. Things like seaweed or sauerkraut, which weren't part of, my cultural heritage. They weren't foods that my parents ate. They'll eat those now, but neither of them will touch a chicken nugget. So kids don't always gravitate to stereotypical kids' foods, and they might surprise you if you offer variety. I would love if my kids would eat chicken nuggets because they are available at so many places. But one day we'll keep offering the chicken nuggets, and maybe one day they'll eat them. Who knows? Something else that's been really important for our family is that this approach works really well for kids with food allergies, because kids with allergies are told no to so many foods. And so there's already a lot of restriction in their lives. And I think the benefit of this division of responsibility approach is that there's no restriction. You're offering them yes foods all the time, within obviously what's safe. So a part of the division of responsibility is not to just serve foods that are considered healthy based on, who even knows what these days. Something that's considered healthy one year is unhealthy the next. But it's not just serving, veggies and protein. We include all kinds of food in our presentations. If you're looking for a resource for this, there's a Facebook group that's amazing. It's called Raising the Anti-Diet Kids. And it's a great resource because they're really strong on division of responsibility, and they're really strong on raising intuitive eaters, which is what division of responsibility is all about. So as part of this approach, we often include things like dairy-free chocolate or ice blocks during the week. So they're not things that are really restricted by us. We eat things that are considered unhealthy just as part of our meals. They're offered all the time, often in unlimited quantities. And because of that, it's when it comes to things like Easter or birthday parties, our kids don't really feel the need to go wild on those foods because they're not forbidden, they're not rare. We'll go to parties and my daughter will get like halfway through a slice of cake and she'll just walk away when she's full. Or this Easter, my daughter had just a huge pile of chocolate Easter eggs available to her, and she only ate one. Not because I told her to stop. Actually, we were sort of encouraging her to eat more because for me, eating an abundance of chocolate at Easter is part of the celebration. But she'd had enough and she was quite comfortable listening to her body. She didn't feel the need to eat all the chocolates just because they were there. And for me, it was a real sign that this approach is working. She is listening to her body. She is intuitive. And part of that is that things really balance out over time when you zoom out. So even though some weeks it feels like all one child is eating is bread, the next week they're into the protein and they skip the carbs. Some weeks we have really high vegetable intake, and then a few weeks when nothing green gets touched. And it's really easy to let that worry you on a day-to-day basis. But when you zoom out over time, it really evens out. This division of responsibility helps me remember that balance doesn't happen in a single meal or even in a single week. It happens over the long run, and it happens by letting your child develop intuition around what they're eating and what their body is asking for on any given day. Some children do have trouble with listening to their body, especially if you haven't previously used an approach like division of responsibility. So if this is something new to your family and you do give it a go, Ellyn has done a lot of research into the fact that, for a while your child might gorge on something that was previously restricted, but over time they just start to develop these skills of listening to their body and not just eating something because they're used to it, being a limited quantity or something special. So it can feel really counterintuitive to use an approach like this, especially if you grew up with rules like clean your plate or no dessert until you finish your veggies. But this approach just takes a lot of stress out of meal times for us and helps me focus on what I can control, which is planning and serving relatively balanced meals, creating a really pleasant family table to sit at, and then let go of the rest. So it's not perfect, but it's peaceful, and it's helping my children develop skills that will serve them well into adulthood. Because in a world where we're growing up with so much diet culture just everywhere, raising children who can listen to what their bodies need and try and ignore that outside noise is going to stand them in really good stead for a reasonably healthy life. And for us, that's a really huge win. So if If you haven't heard of this approach before or are interested in learning more, I really recommend reading Ellyn Satter's Secrets to Feeding a Healthy Family, or you can even check out the Ellyn Satter Institute online. I will link them in the show notes. And if you're curious about trying this at home, start small. There's a lot of factors to division of responsibility. The easiest way to do it is just serve a meal you normally would, but serve it family style, so in the middle of the table rather than pre-plating it. Let your child serve themselves, decide what goes on their plate, depending on how old they are. So, we have lots of little tongs, so my toddler can choose herself what she wants off a plate. But there are some things, if we're serving it from a big vat of something hot, we actually do the physical serving, but she decides whether or not she wants us to put it on her plate. So it might feel a bit awkward at first, and it might feel like you're creating a lot more dishes because, when you're putting everything on the table in serving dishes, you are making a few more. But for us, it's worth it. It takes so much pressure off, both for us and for them. I would love to hear whether or not you're using an approach like division of responsibility at home. So please reach out to me on my Instagram at notjusttheories, especially if you've got any funny anecdotes about things your kids might have tried using this approach, like a blueberry and mayonnaise wrap that you wouldn't personally have chosen to serve them. I would love to hear from you. Until next week, goodbye. Thanks so much for listening to Not Just Theories. I really appreciate you being here. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow, leave us a rating or review, or just share this episode with someone else who you think might find it comforting or useful. I hope to see you back here soon.